All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Chris Kraus, your and development specialist at Embraer, and I want to welcome you to our latest remote learning webinar. Today's topic is our Prater overview. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker in just a minute, but first, as always, a little bit of light housekeeping. It looks like everyone has done this. They've muted their microphones and disabled the video. If you don't see that your video is disabled or that your mic is muted, please click and make sure that it is. The session is being recorded, as always. We're going to upload this into Empower later on today so that those that were not able to attend today are able to see this at a later time. We're going to have Q&A at the end of the presentation. I know we've got a large group of people that are on the call, so we might try this through chat. Let's see how that goes. And as always, a post-session survey, and I'll send out the link to that survey immediately after the webinar. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Ricardo Carvalho, also known as Carva to most people at Embraer, in sales engineering. So Carva, it's great to have you back again.
That's great, Christopher. Just a quick confirmation. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, you sound great.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here again, and thank you all who are joining today. It's very hard, I mean, to start this conversation without thanking each and every one of you for the deliveries we did last quarter. So we have just closed the third quarter of, and some people are more directly involved, some others more indirectly. But in the end of the day, putting an airplane out of the door and receiving money for it, it's our very basic goal here. So thank you so much for all of you who made it happen. And I think what you see here today in my presentation is very connected to the reasons why customers come to us and buy our airplanes. Okay, so I'll get it started with a car. And this, for the ones who have watched the Phenom conversation, those first slides will be exactly the same because I think it's an important primer for our conversations. So what you see in the screen is a Honda SUV. I think this is a medium size SUV. And in the car world, as you know, you have different shapes, different sizes, and different categories. And why this exists? This exists because there is different categories of customers who have different needs. Okay, so you see the SUV, you can see here in this next picture the sedan, a car with wheels and engines, but a different shape, a different size. Okay, so those cars are serving different customers and different segments. With airplanes, this is not very different, but what I would like to tell you is how it works. I mean, you can see here all the different classes of car that exist. So let's try to explain, I'll try to explain to you how it works in business aviation. So what you see in the screen are the categories we have today in our marketplace. So we go all the way from the entry. We have today 6, some people say it's 7 or 8. To simplify here, I'm showing you the 6 categories. So we go all the way from entry-level jets in the bottom, usually $4 million airplanes like the Phenom 100, and we go all the way up to 70, $75 million airplanes in the ultra long range category. One thing you can realize when you look to this slide is that the airplanes are growing in size as you go from the bottom to the top, right? But a question that you may have in mind, I guess, when I buy an RV or an SUV, I'm looking for a bigger car because I need to carry more things, right? This is not exactly the case in our business. So a question you may have, why does aircraft grow with the range? Why less range, smaller, longer range, bigger? And there is a very fundamental thing about aircraft is that it's not very easy to stop like in a car. So if you need a break, be it a toilet break or to pick some gas, I mean, this operation will take 5 minutes, right? But stopping in an airplane is not that easy. You have to go down the airport, the taxi in, taxi out, so on and so forth. So you're pretty much locking people inside this environment for the amount of hours that it's related to the range you see on the left side. So in an airplane like a Phenom 100, we will be locked there for 2 to 3 hours because that's the that's the extent of its range. So as you be locked there for this period, I mean, we can stay in our cars for 2 to 3 hours without standing up. We may use a toilet, but we may not, right? Food will be limited to snacking. Now think about 6 to 8, 9 hours. I mean, the needs now change. You certainly will be using that toilet. You need more food, maybe a full meal, right? And definitely you have a need to stand up and stretch your legs. And when you go above 12 hours, other needs arise. Maybe in 12 hours you would change clothes. You need a shower, and you would be certainly sleeping. So now you need properly space and facilities to sleep. So business jets grow in size, not really because the buyers want to fly more people into the jet, but it's mainly because the flight gets longer and you have to cater to a lot more needs during that longer flight. Okay, and you can see this a little bit in the right side of the slide, what things are added. So we start with the Phenom 100 that has a very basic refreshment center. In the Phenom 300 category, 5 hours, people will be using the lav a lot more. So we have the externally serviced lav. From 6 hours on, I mean, stand up capability, you want to stretch your legs, right? When you go to 9 to 12 hours, more space for food, more bedding available inside the aircraft. And above 12 hours, you see things like shower, like a private space where you can sleep, and even spaces for gathering, right? Because the whole thing starts get a bit boring when you go beyond 12 hours. So cabins are designed, or the different categories we have are designed around the needs, physiological, even psychological needs of people when locked inside those machines for that amount of hours, okay? And this defines all the categories we have presented. So all of that to say that the Phenoms, they belong to the light and entry level categories. And today we're talking about the Praetors, which belong to the mid-size and super mid-size categories. So let's go to the details here. So starting with a big question. When Embraer entered this market, what we had in mind was, okay, we are creating medium jets, a couple of medium jets out there. So how do we create an innovative value proposition in the mid-size and super mid-size segment? How can we be different? The answer is not very complicated to give, but very hard to execute. We at Embraer, we try to bring to this family attributes from larger jets, so things that you would only find in airplanes that cost 50, 60, 70 million dollars, and combine that with the best range and best runway performance of this segment. If you ever heard Michael speaking about those things, you realize that he always divides that or shares our value proposition in 3 different pillars: technology, comfort, and performance. So in terms of technology, how we implemented this vision. The Praetors are the only medium jets in the market which offer fly-by-wire. We'll be talking about what that means, okay? You can only find fly-by-wire in our market today in airplanes that cost more than $50–60 million. And we're offering this in our Praetors. In terms of comfort, we have the lowest cabin altitude. We'll be talking about those concepts, and a level of cabin altitude that was before you would only find in those more expensive airplanes. And in terms of performance, we have the best performance in our segment. So the Praetor 600, and I'll start my presentation with the 600, is capable of flying from Paris to New York and deliver a range, which means a range of over 4,000 nautical miles. Okay, so a hint I gave last time, if you want to convert nautical miles into road miles or terrestrial miles, just make the number 15% bigger. So 4,000 nautical miles equals 4,600 miles, okay? And also great access to very small airports. So let's start to understand that in detail with the comfort portion of it. So this is our cabin. Some very important characteristics here. Flat floor, okay? You have in the sides the largest windows in the segment, okay? It's among all the medium jets, those are the largest windows. And when you look to the ceiling, it's a very open and airy ceiling. I mean, we could really benefit a lot from the shape of the fuselage to maximize the passenger experience. So you see in this slide the building blocks of the interior, the cross section in the left side, the flat floor, the very open ceiling. I'm highlighting this because there are some airplanes in the competition that they have the same width and height, but when you walk through the plane, you feel you're walking through a tunnel because the ceiling is so narrow that you have that tunnel feeling. So this is a very important thing. In the right side, you have our floor plan for the Praetor 600. You can see those two areas, like two cabin areas, one up front with 4 seats, one in the back with another 4 seats, that you can replace 2 of those seats by a 3-place divan. Okay, we offer up front a side-facing seat. This is a patented feature by Embraer that allows to carry an extra passenger or a flight attendant in that position. And when it's not in use, you can just fold it up and it becomes a wardrobe. So you take benefit of that space during your flight. In terms of going next here, in terms of sleeping, remember my first slides, right? So a Praetor 600 is an airplane it's putting you close to 9. I did myself a flight from Rio de Janeiro to Fort Lauderdale, was 9 hours and 26 minutes in this airplane. So if you're doing this overnight, you certainly be sleeping. So Embraer has certified this way of putting 2 seats together and creating a bed, as you can see in the slide here. So each one of those beds will have 7 long, and up to 4 beds can be made in a Praetor 600. In the case of a Praetor 500, we were talking about 2 beds. This is a very interesting picture because it's all about what you cannot see here, right? Usually airplanes in this class, in the right-hand side of the airplane, in this position you're looking, they have an emergency exit in this position. And our emergency exit is located in the lavatory. Why is this important? Well, when you have an emergency exit in the cabin, I think all of you maybe have had an experience of flying an airliner, and you know that seats that are close to the emergency exits on airliners, they have some limitations. They cannot recline, they cannot move, because in case something happens, the access to that emergency exit has to be easy. The same thing happens in business aviation. When you have an emergency exit, there is a lot of restrictions about the thing around them. So usually when you have an emergency exit in the main cabin, The table under that emergency exit will not work. The seats will not move in the same way. So this brings a lot of restrictions to the cabin, together with the look and the shape of an emergency exit, that it's not the nicest. So we at Embraer, we were the first to certify an emergency exit in the lavatory in this segment. And this is very important and brings great value to the customer. The airplane is just as safe as any other airplane, if not safest, but keeps this great cabin appearance and functionality. I have mentioned in my first slide cabin altitude. What that means? Cabin altitude is the altitude you feel inside the cabin compared to the altitude you would feel if you were on Earth, let's say, right? So the cabin altitude of the Praetor 600 and 500 is 5,800 feet. So if you're flying at 45,000 feet, I mean, life doesn't exist up on that altitude, you will feel inside the cabin like you were at 5,800 feet, higher than Denver. This has all to do with air density and air concentration, the amount of oxygen you have in the air. So 5,800 feet cabin altitude is the best in class, okay? The competitors in the Praetor 600 category will be offering 7,000, 8,000 feet. And what this number means, the higher it is, like when you go to Aspen, to Telluride, to Colorado, if you try to go for a short run, you probably you probably run out of the air a lot quicker than in Miami, because there is a lot less oxygen in the air. Same effect here. In average, airliners have 8,000 feet cabins. And when you go for a long flight in an airliner, no longer how well you slept, or no matter how good your seat is, you feel tired in the end of the trip. And this has to do with the oxygen concentration. However, offering 1,500 feet puts our passenger in a much better shape. And this number is best in class. Together with that, air quality is a great topic today. Not sure if you have heard about HEPA filters. HEPA is an acronym for High Efficiency Particulated Air Filter. But what matters more than the acronym is that this filter is able to collect and trap 99.97% of the particles that are in the air. So it's very good to take viruses and bacteria out of the air. The Praetor 600 is the only airplane in class that offers this feature as a baseline feature. Once we have talked about interior, now it's time to touch base on performance. This can go a little technical sometimes, and I'll try to smooth the message to all of you and make it very relatable. So try not to think a lot about the numbers. Really put your attention in the CDPs and capabilities I'll be mentioning. So the Praetor 600 has the best range when flying fast, Mach 0.80. Remember from the last session what that means. 80% of speed of sound, right? Which is it's a good speed for business jets in this category. When flying at that good speed, we will deliver a range of 3,700 nautical miles. This means flying from London to New York very comfortably, okay, in terms of range margins. However, when you slow down the plane, it gives gas mileage back to you. So when you slow down to a speed we call long range cruise, which will be like Mach 0.75 or around 500 miles per hour, your range will be over 4,000 nautical miles. And the Praetor is the only airplane in class that has this nice characteristic of giving you a lot of mileage back once you slow down. And the main responsible for that is this very nice Bing winglet you see on the screen and in the production line when you see the airplane over there. One thing customers ask to us, but Ricardo, I mean, is this true? Because I bought an airplane from another manufacturer years ago, and I had a miserable experience because I was promised a number, and when I got the airplane, the numbers were totally different. And what I usually answer is, Mr. Customer, this is not Embraer. We really stand behind the numbers we put out. And to show that to customers, we have performed actual flights. So all that you see in the screen are actual flights we have flown with the Praetor 600 ourselves. Two of them were flown by customers, but you can see by the numbers, 3,900, 3,800, 3,500. Most of those with the 6 passengers on board, more than the 4 of the basic spec, and pretty much going very close to the limits of the airplane. So we not only publish numbers, we deliver in the performance we promise. So very good, an important thing to keep in mind. And if there is anyone here related to the production process that it's hearing me, I tell you, keeping weight under control is super important because it has all to do with the range that the customer will experience in the end of the day. So weights are a very important thing to allow us to deliver those numbers. Going far is very important. However, business aviation is also about where you go, right? So the Praetors have the best runway performance of their categories. What that means, runway performance, they can land and take off in shorter runways than its competitors. So let's say if you take the case of Santa Monica in California, this is a small airport. The runway has 3,500 feet, right? So the competitor has to land at Van Nuys or Angeles International, LAX, in order to go to Santa Monica. And then you land there, and then you drive another hour if traffic is helping you, and then you get there. The Praetor customer, it will land in the small, tiny Santa Monica airport directly. So it's a more direct flight. So this allows you to save time and adds a lot more convenience. The airport on the left side, that's Angra dos Reis in Brazil. And I'm putting it here because this airport has a 3,000 feet runway. It's a very short one. And the Praetor can fly from there to a couple of very important cities in Brazil. So in the end of the day, guys, business aviation is about convenience. And by making this airplane so capable of accessing small airports, we can deliver this very unique capability. This, and I think the natural question now is, okay, Ricardo, so what Embraer did so special in order to deliver this capability? It has a lot to do with the fly-by-wire. Remember, I told you we are the only in class to have that. I will explain later in the presentation what fly-by-wire is, and you will understand why we are able to deliver such great numbers. But I wanted to give you a little break of my boring voice, and I'll play a video here this airplane is a customer's airplane. And this customer bought the airplane because he was able to base the Praetor 600 in his home airport, which is a tiny 2,900 feet runway in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So we did this of the capability out of this tiny runway. And while we watch the video, please notice how quickly it stops and how soon it takes off out of such a short runway. Just a reference, I'm talking runway lengths, 2,900, 3,000, 3,500. So to give a reference, long or short airport is or runway is, Melbourne International Airport, the airport where we are located here, it has a 10,000 feet runway. So those runways you see in the screen are more than 3 times shorter than Melbourne. So let's play the video. So 2,900 feet. Look how quickly this airplane will stop. Pretty much done, has no speed anymore. Look at the takeoff run. This is the only airplane in its class that can do this operation in the way you saw it. Okay, and this is a very important selling point of our Praetor family. And the reason why we can do that, it's very related to the fly-by-wire system. And I would like to talk a little bit about that. Fly-by-wire, what that means? I mean, it means there is no cables, right? So the usual airplane, you have a steel cable. If you take the Phenom 300 or 100 in the production line here, and you go there, you will realize there are steel cables connecting the pilot's yokes to the tail and to the wings, right? A fly-by-wire plane doesn't have steel cables. It has electric signals, electrical wiring that will read what the pilot's trying to do and will send that signal to an actuator that it's very close to the aerodynamic surfaces, and that actuator will do the control. When I have this kind of architecture, I'm able to put something in the middle, some intelligence like a computer, okay? And this augments the pilot's ability in controlling the airplane and gives a great help in critical and emergency scenarios. Embraer is the business aviation manufacturer that domains this technology for the longest time. And our first fly-by-wire product was the AMX, a fighter jet that first flew in 1984. Our E-Jets family, more than 1,600 airplanes flying, rely on fly-by-wire technology. And together with the Praetors, our C390 and the second generation of the E-Jets have this great technology. In business aviation, okay, the Praetors, so usually I get questions about the price. So the list price of a Praetor 600 is $21 million, right? The next in line in the industry in pricing that will offer fly-by-wire, it's an airplane over $45 million called the G500, Gulfstream 500. And in commercial aviation, every new commercial airliner is a fly-by-wire airplane, okay? So if you go to Boeing product line, this 777 was a more rudimentary fly-by-wire. The 787 Dreamliner is a full fly-by-wire. If you go to Airbus, I mean the A350, it's a full fly-by-wire airplane. If you go to former Bombardier and now Airbus C-Series, it's a full fly-by-wire airplane. So this is the future of aviation, and Embraer understood that very early and started to domain and bring this great technology to our airplanes. So this slide is a bit complicated, and I really don't want to go too technical here, but when this system is really important, when controllability is in danger or when structure is in danger. Okay, so in case I'm the airplane has a maximum speed. If I try to overspeed the airplane, the system will take over and reduce the speed. If my speed is now too low, on the other side, I'm flying too low, and I'm almost totally losing lift in the airplane, which we call stall, the system will take over and increase that speed by putting the nose down. Okay, and this is very important because to take off of those short runways, it's very important to be able to get off the ground with the minimum speed possible. As I have a system that will help me to avoid that I go under that dangerous speed, right? I can take the airplane almost to a limit with no problem and take off of those short runaways. The competitors, they need to be 10 to 15% faster to be able to lift from the ground because they rely on conventional systems. And because of that, they need longer runways. So here's the magic, right? And there's a lot of other things. I mean, if you lose an engine in this, when I say lose, I mean, if for any reason you have a malfunction in an engine and an engine turns off, in this this is one of the most stressful situations usually pilots have to train for in simulators when doing their initial training. This airplane, because you can imagine, I mean, if one engine went off and the other is on, you have some kind of asymmetry in thrust, right? And those engines are powerful, and pretty much you have to regain control of the airplane in a very quick way. The system senses if that has happened, and the airplane will self-compensate. We, as we say, auto-trim for this situation, and the pilot will have a great help in handling this difficult scenario. So very important safety things. The other thing, okay, this is cool for the pilot and for the passenger who's in the back. This is a very cool thing, guys. I mean, this system allows the airplane to have a characteristic where it has additional dampening. So in case you have turbulence, I think no one likes turbulence, right? So in case you have turbulence, the airplane will sense the turbulence. The system is monitoring the airplane 100 times per second. And by sensing that turbulence, it will start to work in the surfaces to alleviate that turbulence. So it's like, imagine in your car, you have your shock absorbers, and now all of a sudden you are going through very rough terrain, very rough pavement, and the car would feel that and change the rigidity of your shock absorbers in order to deal better with that kind of bad pavement. So this is more or less what's happening here in the Praetors, and this is a very special and unique technology. I always get questions about competitors. Okay, so the basic presentation and features of the Praetor 600 were presented, and I would like to talk now about our two main competitors in this class. The first is the Bombardier Challenger 350, and I would like to share with you what we usually say when promoting our products against the Challenger. So a very important proposition, just had a sip of water. Sorry, a very important proposition we put in the customer's hands is the following, what you can see in this slide. The Praetor, as I said in the beginning, has features that you only can find in airplanes beyond 50, 60, 70 million dollars. Okay. And I will not go through the list in the left, but there is a lot of very important features that the Praetor has that you only be able to find in the Global 500. And what is special about this airplane? This is the biggest airplane in Bombardier's portfolio. So to have some things we are offering for you in the Praetor for 20 million, if you're looking to the Bombardier product line, you only find this list in their $70 million airplane, okay? And the direct competitor, which the Challenger 350, doesn't offer any of them. So it's not a fly-by-wire airplane. The avionics is from a generation behind. Auto throttle, which is a system that the best analogy is the automatic shift in your cars, right? We offer that. The Challenger 350 offers something that it's like a manual stick shift, to use this analogy. The low cabin altitude, remember, we have 5,800 feet. The Challenger is like an airliner, 8,000 feet cabin, and some other features. The Challenger is slightly wider, 4 inches, but if you look to the picture in the left, you will realize that we have the same seat width and our aisle is 2 inches wider. And you may ask why. So how come the cabin is wider in the Challenger and we have the same seat and a wider aisle? Is because the Challenger wastes cabin space with a side ledge, the surface that goes in the side. They have this side ledge, the surface here, which is kind of, I think, 9 inches wide, that goes all the way through the cabin. And in the Praetor, we have an optimized design. We only have the surface where it matters. So you can find the couch, it pretty much disappears. So because of that, we are able to deliver seats as wide as the Challenger and a wider aisle, okay? Despite the Challenger is a little bit wider. And this is a very important thing that customers realize. The emergency exit, as discussed, so just showing you an example of what we discussed in the beginning of the presentation. You can see that emergency exit in the Challenger in the bottom, right, in the left side, you can see there is an ugly cut between the passengers. The table that should be there doesn't work while we have a full table. And also those 2 seats will have restricted movements because of the emergency exit, while we do have our emergency exit in the lavatory. Cabin altitude, we have discussed that in the beginning. I'll move forward. In terms of range, we have 24% more range. So, I mean, when you're flying from, as I said, from Paris to New York, the Challenger will be an airplane to do at best a New York, LA kind of flight. Okay, to go back from Europe, they will likely need a stop. And in terms of airport access, right? So you saw that very short runway. So this comparison is showing how far the Challenger can fly out of a 5,000 feet runway and how far we can fly. To make things even more dramatic, we made this runway wet, which means more slippery. And you can see that from this 5,000 feet runway wet, numbers, the Praetor would fly its full range, 4,000 miles, and the Challenger, we would be able to only be able to fly 1,900 nautical miles. Why this happens? Remember, the Challenger needs to be faster in order to take off, right? And especially in a wet runway, if you need to be faster, if you, in case something goes wrong and you need to stop, you have to stop within the runway, right? So the Challenger has to be lighter in order to be able to stop within the runway. And by being lighter means carrying less fuel, which is why it has a lot less range. So this is pretty much how it works. Another important competitor in this class is the Gulfstream G280. So you see it here. The trick plays, so there are some, I would say the G280 is a faster airplane than the Challenger and faster than us. It's slightly faster, like 2% faster, but it has less range and doesn't have the fly-by-wire, and the cabin altitude is higher, okay, and doesn't have a stand-up cabin with flat floor. So it's a very good competitor, but we have several advantages and capabilities it doesn't have. And the most noticeable, if you go to an air show and look to the plane, will be the flat floor. So if you look to the picture in the right-hand side of your slide, you see there is that recessed aisle in the G280, okay? It's 1 inch taller, but it has that recess. So think about people in wheelchairs or think about the mobility around the cabin. This is, I would say, one of the weakest points of the G280, and this is something that customers really praise about the Praetor 600. As I said, again, no emergency exit in the cabin for us. You can see in the left, you see that emergency exit in the G280. You can see the cut, all the signage around the emergency exit. And that seat will have no table or a compromised table, and seat movements like tracking swivel will be very restricted. In terms of range, we have more range than the G200. So when flying fast, our range is 3,700. Theirs is 3,600 nautical miles. But we have this ability of when going is slower, remember, because of the big winglet you see in the screen, our airplane is able to give that back to the operator in terms of mileage. So when we get slower, we go all the way to 4,000 nautical miles. So you get another 300 nautical miles, whereas the competitor will be getting around 100, 120 nautical miles once they get slower. The wet runway game here is not as dramatic as you saw in the Challenger 350, but still very important. So when both airplanes take off from a limited runway, a 5,000 feet wet runway, the Praetor will perform no problem at its full capability, whereas the G280 will have a takeoff weight limitation, which, as I said, will imply removing fuel from the airplane and resulting in a lower range. So whereas we're flying 4,000 nautical miles out of the runway, the G280 will be flying 3,000 nautical miles. Moving forward, the big question now is, okay, how about the 500? So Ricardo, what's the difference? Guys, basically, cockpit is the same. The wings, the aerodynamic shape of the wings is the same. The 600 will carry a lot more window. In the picture here, I have left the 600 as a reference. So the 600 has this big belly here, right? And carries a lot, I said window, a lot more fuel. And the 500 will not have this belly here, okay? But the wings look exactly the same. The cockpit is the same. The engines are the same, but with a little less thrust. The big difference will be, as you know, in length. So the Praetor 500 carries less fuel and has 3.5 feet. It's a 3.5 feet shorter compared to the Praetor 6. The 500 is 3.5 feet shorter than the Praetor 600. Okay, and what this means is that the cabin, instead of having those two cabin areas that we could see in the 600, here we'll have 1.5 areas. So if you remember, the 600 was 4 seats and then 4 seats in the second area. Here you see is 4 seats in the first area and 2 seats in the second area. Okay, very often people replace that single seat on the top by a 2-place divan or a full-size galley. Cross-section in the left is exactly the same. In terms of range, we have designed the Praetor 500 to be, there is a market jargon, which is the coast to coast. We like to say corner to corner. It's really from Miami to Seattle or from New York or even Bangor, Maine to LA, depending on the day. And it does this mission very fast. So it's by far the fastest airplane in its segment. In terms of takeoff performance and landing, airport performance, all the same great things we told about the Praetor 600 can be said about the 500. And my last slides are about the competition. So in this segment, which you call the mid-size segment, the main competitor is the Citation Latitude, okay? And this is a very interesting and not obvious competition for customers, because the Praetor 600 is better than the Latitude in every single thing. So our range is 3,300 nautical miles. So remember, corner to corner, the latitude has 600, I mean 25% less, 600 nautical miles less, which is 25%, and delivers a range of 2,700. I mean, we are 30, 35 knots faster. Depending on the type of flight you're going to, the Praetor will be able to cover the distance in a long flight in 1 hour less time than a Latitude. The fly-by-wire that we have in the Latitude doesn't. Cross-section, the Praetor is 5 inches wider than the Latitude, and so on and so forth. So we're superior in everything. However, the market leader is the Latitude. So in what we are not superior, the price. They are cheaper than we are. Okay. So, and this is something that that for sure it's a challenge for us. But again, as Michael likes to say, we are here to offer the ultimate experience. So yes, we have the best product and we have the highest price. This is the value proposition that we put in the marketplace. However, as you can see in the slide, the Latitude is an inferior product in a large extent. This is just showing the cabin for you. Okay, so you can see the cross section, as I said, same height, 5 inches shorter, and narrower. And you can see cabin length as well, right? While we offer 24 feet of usable cabin length, the Latitude will have 21. But the big challenge we face, in full honesty, is the difference in price. A Praetor 500 fully equipped, you're looking to a $17.5–18 million airplane, even a little more. A Latitude in the marketplace, you can find for that the airplane around 15 and a half. Okay, and both sides are able to discount, be sure, but in average we find a 2 to 3 million difference when you're considering a Praetor 500 versus a Latitude. So this was today's presentation. I feel I spoke a lot, so now I'm anxious to see if we have any questions I can help you with. So Christopher, let me know if we have any questions.
Sure. Why don't we do it this way? Because we do have a lot of people on the call. I'd like to try using the raise your hand button. So at the top of the screen, you all see there's a hand. If you have a question, click that raise your hand and I will call on you. So go ahead. If anybody has any questions, click that button and we'll see what we've got. In the meantime, this has been really fascinating for me. I understood, well, I thought I understood fly-by-wire. I understand it even more now. This really cleared up a lot for me, so thank you for that.
It's a pleasure, and I totally, I mean, it's funny, in our activity, Christopher, we have to explain this system for a plethora of audiences. I mean, some people are super technical, some people are not in aviation, and it's one of our challenges here as sales engineers to make things explainable in a way that anyone can understand. So I'm glad I have added to that understanding to the group. But that's an ongoing conversation, guys. So if anyone in the audience wants to reach out to us anytime to learn more and to understand, oh, Ricardo, I didn't get what you said. What's the computer? Or what's a control law? Or, or any buzzwords you guys hear, feel free to share with us, and we're glad to explain.
Nice. Yeah, the other thing I'd like to ask, if you can send me the link to that YouTube video that you showed. I thought that was very fascinating. And I would love to be able to send that out with the survey so that people can watch it again. It really explains a lot.
Excellent.
Yes.
And I think it's a good point. I can send the link for the video, and provided, this brings a good point for me to share. This airplane really changes the paradigm of what kind of airport you can go with an airplane of this size. So because of that, we found important to make a lot of videos and put online for the people to believe that we could go to such places. So if you do some search there, there will be a lot of videos on top of this great one I've shown you. And we try to, it's so different what the Praetor can deliver that we really try to make a big buzz. So happy to do that, Chris.
Great. And speaking of the video, we actually have a question from Thomas Richardson about this. He says, hey, Ricardo, thank you for your time. During the video for the landing distance example, does it matter if auto brake is utilized or no auto brake?
This is a great question, and the answer is not super straightforward, but I will give it a try, Tom, and thanks for the question. So there are two answers for the question. Auto brake, it will help you a lot in the landing maneuver, and it's very likely that with auto brake on in the very high setting, you will physically, if you were in the airport, you see the airplane landing even shorter, okay? So probably the auto brake, all factors considered, will give you a shorter actual distance than maybe what the crew would command. That said, all the numbers the pilot has to fly with in the manuals, we made sure that the auto brake numbers were a bit worse. And now you ask me, Ricardo, why? I will explain why. It's because in an emergency, we don't want, I mean, the pilots, since it's a human factors thing, since flight school, I mean, they're flying those little airplanes, I mean, then they go to bigger airplanes and so on and so forth. The mental training is, in case of emergency, just go and slam on the brakes, right? So now we have this nice airplane, super technological, that you have this auto brake, which is a button. So the pilot may wonder in case of emergency, okay, should now I rely on my brakes or is the button doing the best thing for me? We don't want them to even think about this. The order is go and slam in the brakes, right? So the published numbers for the auto brake will give you a little worse runway performance than slamming the brakes, but the actual performance, in fact, might be a little better. Okay, so I know it's a complicated answer, but this has a lot to do with Embraer's experience in the human factors side of the house. We don't want the pilots, oh, maybe I shouldn't slam the brakes because the other thing is working. No, man, go and slam the brakes. And that's the best thing you can do. So just bringing this background. So this is the answer. Any other question, Christopher?
I'm so sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, we do have another question here. Daniel asks, are there differences between the Praetor 500/600 and the Legacy 450/500?
Great question, Daniel. I should have addressed that in my presentation. My apologies. So there are and they are not the same in one case or the other, okay? Praetor 500 and Legacy 450. They're very similar airplanes. The difference is that in the Praetor 500, you will have the new winglets, the very long ones, and you have another 900 pounds of fuel, okay? So in the Legacy 450, you have 12,000 pounds of fuel. In the Praetor 500, you have 13,000 pounds of fuel. Okay, so that's the differences, which will result in a difference in range of more or less 400 nautical miles. We offer the ability to convert a Legacy 450 into a Praetor 500. This is something we sell to the marketplace because the change, I wouldn't say it's minor because the airplane will have to stay at least a month on the shop for the conversion, but it's doable. Now, Legacy 500 to the Praetor 600. Now the difference, the type of differences are the same, is the winglet. and the fuel, but the fuel is a lot more. So the Legacy 500 had 13,000 pounds of fuel. The Praetor 600, 16,000 pounds of fuel. So it's a lot more. And because of all these extra weights, we had to put stronger engines on it as well. It's the same engine, the same shape, but we have programmed it a little different. So it has 8% more engine thrust. Okay, and because of that, the Praetor 600 delivers 4,000 nautical miles range. The Legacy 500 delivers 3,100. So those are the basic differences, and the conversion of a Legacy 500 into a Praetor 600 is not possible.
Very good. And we have one other question here. Can you share with us what the safety features are between the Praetor and our competition? This question comes from Ophelia out in Arizona.
I love the question, and it's a very good one. Usually, Ophelia, we try not to be very braggy in the marketplace in terms of safety. I mean, this is we try not to compete mentioning I'm better, I'm safer, or that competitor is safer. And I think this unwritten rule is well respected by all of us. But in fact, your question has an answer. So in the case of the Praetor 500, there is infrared cameras, enhanced vision system that we call it, that allows the pilot to see through clouds, especially in the days where you have fog, you have snow. So the pilot has this infrared camera, he or she can see through the clouds. And this definitely will help you with the safety scenario, right? Because now you have much better awareness on top of other things. So this is one feature that in the 500 definitely enhances safety because the competitor doesn't have. In the case of the 600, it offers the same thing. The competitors do have this feature, but I would say the fly-by-wire altogether. Remember, I was describing those critical situations where the system is a helping hand to the pilot. So in my opinion, it enhances safety compared to an airplane that doesn't have. But you'll never see an Embraer ad or a public communication really punching those points from a safety standpoint. We at best we use enhanced safety, but we will never go very vocal about being safer than a competitor because this is a subject we really don't we don't want to compete provoking suspicion of people regarding to aviation, right? So we want them to embrace aviation, and then we'll compete in some other features. But great question.
Nice, nice. All right, we're coming up to we're close to the end here, but I do have one other question. Very interesting from April. It says, beyond price, what would competitors be telling customers about what the downfalls are for the Praetor in trying to sell their product, and how do we respond?
Okay, great. So very good question, April. Thanks for it. It's very hard, as you can see, guys. I have mentioned several superlatives here, and they are not just our side of conversation. They are pretty much true, right? And it's very hard for them to find arguments against us. So they try usually to downplay what it's an advantage for us, right? They try to say that fly-by-wire is not a big deal, or they try to say that cabin altitude might not be that important for a short flight. So there is this tactic. In the case of the G280, sometimes they say they are faster, and they are 0.02 Mach, which means 15 miles per hour, that it's 1 minute every hour. And this is not very relevant, but they try to say that. Can't say that. But the main thing they try to push is to say that the Praetor is a very new airplane, okay? Because of that, it's not very mature, and because of that, not very reliable. And how do we tackle that back? With data. So the first element is to show the reliability history of the Praetor. So we have a dispatch reliability of 99.73%, which means that out of 1,000 flights, we are talking about maybe 2 missed flights because of problems. And so we have those numbers. And the second thing, remember, and I think the question was very fortunate, the Praetor is a the legacy 450 and 500 that has logged to date another 200,000 flight hours. So there is a lot of maturity that comes from that platform. I would say that this has been the best argument they have. Is the best, not the best, but the most used argument is that, Mr. Customer, the Praetor is a new airplane, so you have headaches, you have problems and challenges, and I have delivered 800 Challengers, and I'm a proven platform, so on and so forth. So this is, I would say, the question that we most often see out there.
Got it. Got it. All right. So, Carver, we have one other question. Christine, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Okay, hi. Yeah, real quick. So regarding the emergency exit being in the cabin, I know we used to offer it for the Legacy 450, 500. So I'm just wondering, why we don't offer it for the Praetors. I know there's like limited maneuverability of the seats and whatnot, but for example, if it is cheaper than offering the exit in the toilet by the toilet, then maybe that might make the Praetor 500 more, I don't know, competitive price-wise, for example. Yeah, and then also I was wondering about fractional ownership aircraft like flex jets. I thought for some reason that it was a requirement for them to have the exit in the cabin, but there's been some maybe update to the regulations or something that allows them now to be able to use it in the toilet. Is that right?
It's right, Christina. It's that there is not the regulation is the same, but we managed to work with the regulation. So I will. Great questions. Thank you very much. So the first one, our plan was always to have an emergency exit in the lab, since we have launched the Legacy. What happened is that the certification of that got very challenging. And because of that, we offered the option to have it in the cabin, but this was not what the marketplace wanted. Example of that is that out of 140 Legacy we delivered, only 15 had the emergency exit in the cabin, and the customers were not very happy. They really wanted it in the lab. So it's an option that has no demand per se. Once we were able to certify, we have eliminated the offer in the cabin because here's the second problem. As the marketplace doesn't warrant the emergency exit in the cabin, this was starting to values. So let's say if you're not a so informed customer about the marketplace and for some reason you buy that airplane with the emergency exit in the cabin, you would have a very difficult product. You have a lemon in your hands in the resale market later. So it would be very hard to resell that airplane. So that's why we have eliminated it. And since we did, we never heard the feedback in the contrary. So that's a bit of the story behind it, but very thoughtful question. And the second part of it, okay, the regulation didn't change, and you're absolutely right. So let's say for-profit operators, they had to have emergency exit in the cabin, because you cannot have a door or a hard partition between the emergency exit and the passengers. That was the regulation. So what did we do at Embraer? We have created an electric lavatory door And that electric lavatory door has two characteristics. It can be controlled from the cockpit. So before takeoff and landing, the pilot, I hope, will check with the passengers if no one is in the lav, and then we'll open the door, right? And if for any reason that door is stuck, it's highly frangible. So it's very easy to be broken. We were able to prove both concepts to the authorities, and which is why the authorities allowed us to approve the Praetor with a rigid door in the lav, an emergency exit in the lav, and be able to run for profit or scheduled, or charter operations. Okay, and FlexJet is taking all their new Praetors, although they had some legacy with the emergency exit in the cabin. The Praetors they will be getting will be all with the emergency exit in the lavatory. I was in the meeting where we presented the airplanes to them first time 2 years ago, and they were super pleased. So it's really the story behind that concept. Okay, and thank you for the thoughtful question.
Muito obrigada.
De nada, Christine.
Very good, very good. Hey, we are out of time, but Carver, thank you so much for this session today. I feel like I understand our products a little bit more, and I hope you all do too. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for the time. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, it's a continuous learning. My sincere apologies for going over time, but I think it's not always we have this opportunity, and I hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much and have a nice weekend.
Wonderful. You have a great weekend too. Thanks. And thank you, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.